Have all members recorded their presence? Have all members recorded their presence? Clerk will lock the machine, announce the presence of a quorum.
106 members voting. A quorum is present, Mr. Speaker.
Yep. Members and visitors, please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. The pledge this morning will be led by Representative Will Robinson from his desk.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there corrections to the journal? Hearing none, shall the journal approve? Are there matters on induction and reference?
None on the desk, Mr. Speaker.
Are there communications?
None on the desk, Mr. Speaker.
Are there messages from the Senate?
None on the desk, Mr. Speaker.
Are there reports of standing committees and subcommittees?
None on the desk, Mr. Speaker.
Are there motions relating to committee and subcommittee references? Are there matters on reconsideration? Are there bills and joint resolutions on third reading?
On the desk, Mr. Speaker.
Read the first bill.
By Senator Rodriguez, Senate Bill 2C, a bill to be entitled an act establishing the congressional districts of the state.
All right, members, we're going to get into the first bill in a moment. We're going to enter into structured debate. Structured debate this morning on the redistricting bill will be 75 minutes per side in 15-minute total increments. I'll go back and forth between Representative Wilhite, who will be representing the con side of the bill, and Leader Grant on the pro side. Representative Leak, you're recognized to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the congressional redistricting bill we heard yesterday.
Are there amendments?
None on the desk, Mr. Speaker.
All right, let's begin debate. Representative Wilhite, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the difference of opinion side of this bill, would you recognize Representative Geller?
Representative Geller for his different side of opinion. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that. So, members, here we are. Months of looking at this. This House took a position. Our colleagues across the aisle took a position. We passed something. Frankly, I didn't like what we passed, but we passed, you remember, one from column A, one from column B. You remember that. The governor vetoed it, and he has a right to veto it, and here we are back again. But members, we're not doing our job. Our job is just not to pass anything. Our job, as was told to us by Chair Leak numerous times, by the Speaker numerous times, our job is to pass something constitutional. Now, I'm a believer in our judiciary system in this country, and I think it's great that anybody who has a problem with something we pass or something going on can go to the courts, can ask for relief. You can even challenge a law if you believe that law is contrary to our Constitution, if you think it's unjust. Some of our greatest leaders, suffragists, civil rights leaders, leaders for the rights of people who want to love who they want to love, some of our greatest leaders have challenged unjust laws. But please remember our role. We have something in this country called the Voting Rights Act. It was hard won. It was passed since 1965, and it interpreted something from almost 100 years before the 14th Amendment. We have in this state standards that 63% of our voters voted to put into our Florida Constitution. We call them fair districts. Now, I understand there could be a little bit of politics that might creep into redistricting somehow. But members, our job is to pass something that complies with the Florida Constitution, including those fair districts provisions, and with the Federal Voting Rights Act. If you think that the Voting Rights Act contradicts the 14th Amendment, you can go to court and try to get it overturned. But until that happens, that law is the law of the land, And until our Florida Constitution is otherwise interpreted, we're bound by it. This plan cuts minority districts in this state, African American districts, in half. You don't want to be a part of that, and you don't want to be a part of contradicting the Florida Constitution and the Voting Rights Act. If there's a challenge later, so be it. Our job is to comply with the law as it exists, and this map plainly does not do that. You need to vote it down. Thank you.
Representative Wilhite.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you recognize Representative Driscoll?
Representative Driscoll, recognized in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just the other day, members, when we heard this bill in committee, there was a member of the public who gave testimony, and she said, "I rise in condemnation of this bill." And I'd never heard that before, but I thought it was brilliant. Today, I debate in condemnation of this bill. Albert Einstein once said that no problem can be solved from the same consciousness that created it. And when I look at what we are doing with this map, when I look at the unconstitutionality of it, when I look at how we're violating separation of powers, I can't help but think that we are reverting back to a consciousness that required us to need Fair Districts amendments and a Federal Voting Rights Act in the first place. I'll make 3 points. First, the unconstitutional nature of this map. We are plainly in this map denying minority voters the ability to elect the representative of their choice. We are clearly abiding in retrogression and violation of the 14th Amendment. This map clearly constitutes diminishment when you are taking the number of Black congressional representatives and the ability to have representation in Black communities from 4 to 5. That is diminishment of 50%. 4 to 2. That is diminishment by 50%. I'm a lawyer, not a mathematician. Sorry about that. What I also have observed in this map is that there is packing. All over the place there is packing. If you look in Tampa Bay where I live, in order to arrive at the new congressional districts 14 and 15, there's been so much packing, I don't even know how you could fit more in that suitcase. We are denying minority voters the candidate of their choice, and it is wrong. The second point that I will make is that this map disregards and disrespects the voters of Florida and procedural process. Members, this map, we're the ones who are obligated as a legislature withdrawing this map. I don't know how many times poor Chair Leak had to say he couldn't answer a question. Why not? Because he didn't draw this map and the committee staff didn't draw this map. He just didn't have the answers. Why? Because we are in dereliction of our duty as a legislature. We were the ones who were supposed to draw this map. I heard over and over again, well, the governor is just like any other person in this process who wanted to submit a map. Everybody who has a veto pen in this room, raise your hand. That's what I thought, okay? It's only the governor who has the opportunity and ability and the constitutional authority to veto a map. He is not like every other citizen. He's not like any other citizen in this chamber or any other citizen in the state of Florida. So I'm tired of that. It's time for us to do away with the fiction that this is normal process. This is unprecedented. The third point I'll make, and I've already touched on this a little bit, though, is about separation of powers. And I really want you to hear me with this one. We are headed down a dangerous road. It is a slippery slope. First, it's redistricting. Then it's Disney. What's next? I'm afraid to know what's next. We need to stop this here. You have the ability to stop it here with your vote. This map is unconstitutional, and we should all vote down. Thank you.
Representative Wilhite, you're recognized.
Speaker, would you recognize Representative Valdez?
Representative Valdez in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning, colleagues. Colleagues, we have an obligation to uphold the oath that we all take to defend our Constitution. Unfortunately, I feel the reapportionment proposal before us today fails in that regard. There are decades of precedents of the redistricting processes and countless historical examples of the process being used to marginalize and dilute the power of certain types of voters. That's why the U.S. Congress passed the Voting Rights Act. It's why Florida voters passed the Fair District Amendment in 2010. These are not simply polite suggestions. Following the law and the Constitution is our sacred duty as elected officials. I have deep concern that we are once again choosing a path that does not serve the interest of Florida voters and will tie our state up in yet more costly litigation due to constitutional issues raised by this map. After the Civil War, our nation underwent something of a second American Revolution, born of a recognition of our past mistake in allowing slavery. As part of that absolution, we adopted a new set of amendments to the U.S. Constitution, the 13th Amendment, which outlaw the practice of slavery. Then, the 14th Amendment, which guarantees the equal protection of the law to all Americans, and the 15th Amendment, which grants voting rights regardless of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. These post-Civil War amendments remade the American social contract in profound and positive ways. That 14th Amendment guarantee of equal protection under the law is just as much part of our American identity as the original 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights. That idea, the concept of equal protection under the law is a key underpinning of our modern democracy. But when we decide to take steps that dilute the power of a certain time of American to diminish, or type of American to diminish their ability to meaningfully participate in our democracy, then at minimum, the spirit of equal protection is undermined as well. That means we cannot value the democratic participation of one group over another, because if we do so, we are not ensuring equal protection of the law to all. When we crack open the seat in North Florida that has historically provided an opportunity for minority voters to elect a representative of their choice to Congress, we are not providing equal protection to those voters. Likewise, when laboriously take a Tampa Bay area district across 12 miles of open water, packing minority and Democratic voters into one district to make the surrounding ones less competitive, then we are not providing equal protection to those voters. All we are asking for this is this. Let's live up to the spirit of fairness and equal protection. Let's have a fair and open, transparent process and draw maps that best serve the people of Florida. Not a party, not an agenda, but our constituents. That's why we live, that's why we are here. And to that end, I hope that you will join me in voting down on this map today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Wilhite.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Do you recognize Representative Rayner?
Representative Rayner in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise in opposition to this map. And I want to be very transparent. Y'all know I'm running for Congress. But I'm going to tell you this. Even if I wasn't running for Congress, this is not about me. Because I'm going to start talking about my parents. Y'all know I love to talk about my parents. I love to talk about my father and my mother. I love to talk about my grandparents. I love to talk about my great-grandparents. And I bring up the fact that I'm running because I know someone says, oh, well, she has a vested interest. Yes, I have a vested interest because I'm a black woman in the state of Florida. I have a vested interest because I'm a Black resident in the state of Florida. I have a vested interest because I have Black constituents. I have friends who are Black in Orlando and in Jacksonville who are concerned about what their representation is going to look like. I have a vested interest because I know the struggles of Black and brown folks over the course of 200+ years in this country, but most certainly in this state. I have a vested interest because I understand that it wasn't until the Voting Rights Act that my parents were able to vote. I have a vested interest because when my grandfather was hauling junk and he was a sharecropper and he wasn't able to have representation that reflects him, I have a vested interest. And members, even if you may not be Black or brown, you should have a vested interest. No longer should we be able to have to kowtow and bow down to a person, to a man, that's saying if you don't do certain things, this will happen. We talk about communism and socialism. That's what happens in socialist countries. People are threatened. People are threatened under the cover of dark. And y'all, I know we are better than this. So let me tell you this. This is not about Michelle Rayner, because Michelle Rayner can have a seat and she don't have to run. But guess what I'm not going to do? What I'm not going to do is let this moment pass and not make a record. Because I have my mother's blood and my father's blood coursing through my veins. I have my ancestors' blood coursing through my veins. They have fought and come through too much to allow this House to abdicate their duty to a governor who has political ambition. And yes, I said it, political ambition that's not about the people. So y'all, I hope this isn't falling on deaf ears. And I hope that there's political will on the other side of the aisle, political courage to stand up to a bully. Because when you don't stand up to a bully, they give and they give and they take and they take. So this is our time to stand up to the governor. This is our time to say, we cannot allow this to happen. This is our time to say that we want to be the free state of Florida. Free means free for everybody. Doesn't matter what party you ascribe to. It doesn't matter what you look like or who you love. It doesn't matter if you disagree with the governor. Because this is the free state of Florida for everybody. And so, members, I am asking you now, in this moment, to exact political courage and political will. And I see the time, and thank you, Lord. And I'm going to keep going until my time is runs out. But I'm asking members of this House, all members, stop worrying about your elections. Stop worrying about who may primary you. Stop worrying about line item vetoes. Stop worrying about those things, because I know that when people on the outside who are looking at us, I've gotten all of these text messages on my phone. People on, and appropriations too, thank you. People are tired. Republicans are tired. Democrats are tired. MPAs are tired, because we ought to be working on the things that they care about.
Representative Rayner, your time has expired. The clock stopped over a minute ago. And members, I will remind all of you, we are not talking about personalities today, not personalities of anybody outside this chamber or inside this chamber. We are talking about the maps, and we can talk about the maps, and I would ask that you confine your comments to the maps and not to personalities. With that, we are trying to get the clock fixed. I think we are good. Leader Grant, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you please recognize Representative Tuck in debate?
Representative Tuck, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I rise in support of this map today. I've had the honor of being the vice chair of this committee since the beginning, and it's been an open and transparent process the entire time, even before the governor, quote unquote, got involved. He publicly submitted maps, which is something that anybody can do. He's allowed to do it. Every single member of the public was allowed to do it. We were allowed to do it. He is a citizen of this state. He's allowed to do it just like we are. He even sent multiple staffers to answer our questions ad nauseum. And think about that for a second. How many bills do we encounter where the governor sends an entire staff team to help us understand that rationale? Besides the budget, probably zero. Members, this process only happens once a decade, and just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just different. Our process was thorough, it was transparent, it was open, it was complete, it was constitutional, and it was good. This map is all of those things. This map is a good map. So I urge you all to vote up on it. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Representative Grant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We yield the remainder of our time in the segment.
Thank you. Representative Wilhite, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you recognize Representative Morales?
Representative Morales, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise up today because we need to focus. Members, fair representation is vital to the state of Florida. We're making history today. A fair map is vital. And if it's not right, then let's do it. Let's work together. We can come back. That's why the people voted for us to represent them. We are facing this moment, redistricting. And the point I want to make is that we have to apply by the constitutional law. Our Voters' Right Act, remember, we are legislators. We're supposed to do our job. That's what the people gave us that vote. Members, please vote down on this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Wilhite.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you recognize Representative Brown?
Representative Brown in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In the United States Constitution, our forefathers outlined the separation of powers through 3 branches of government, and that was the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. The intent, though, of the separation of powers is to prevent the concentration of unchecked power and to provide for checks and balances. Therefore, it is our constitutional duty as Americans and as a state legislature to prevent this type of overreach we're seeing in this map drawn for us by the governor. His unchecked power has only continued to grow, not only through this proposed map, but through the attacks of our freedom to vote through last year's bill, Senate Bill 90, and this year's election police force bill. There are claims that the current maps passed by the legislature this session violated the U.S. Constitution's Equal Protection Clause, but the truth is his intent is to disenfranchise the same people that this clause was designed to protect. In these proposed maps, Florida will lose black representation in Congress by nearly 50%, and that doesn't include the barriers that this anti-voter freedom bill that he's put forth will put between every one of us and put barriers between every one of us and the ballot box. In 2010, Florida passed the Fair Districts Amendment 5 and 6 that prohibited politicians from drawing districts to favor themselves and their parties and to ensure that minority voters have equal opportunity to participate in the political process and have fair opportunity to equal representation of their, elect representatives of their choice. These amendments, among others, were approved directly by Florida in a ballot referendum to stop Tallahassee politicians from rigging districts for their own political ambitions. There was no partisan politics involved when that happened. This was the people of Florida directly coming out and saying that they are tired of corrupt politics. So why aren't we really respecting that here? I want to remind my colleagues that Governor DeSantis did not elect you and put you in office. It was the same people of Florida who voted in favor of fair district amendments to our Constitution that did. Although I voted down on the legislative drawing maps, at least those maps went through the appropriate, legitimate process and were agreed upon by majority of you here in this room today. I have a serious problem with the governor and him meddling in the representation of Floridians for his own political gain, and I think that's important to mention here. I have an even bigger problem with folks bullying two entire chambers of government into doing his bidding. He's making Florida legislature do his dirty work and it adversely affects Black constituents. And I will not go down in Florida history as just another pawn for Governor DeSantis. It is not his job to intervene how Floridians are represented. That is between us, the legislature, the courts, and most importantly, the smart and capable people of Florida who trusted in us to represent them. We are not here to represent just one man out of 22 million people. Because of his ambition to become president, we are here to make sure that the voices of the people outside this room are heard.
Representative Wilhite, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You're recognized, Representative Davis.
Representative Davis in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As you all know, I represent the city of Jacksonville, and the city of Jacksonville has had a long, exhaustive history when it comes to race. I was born during a time when Jacksonville still had segregated schools, and it was not until 2018 that the city of Jacksonville officially recognized the terrible events that took place on Axe Handle Saturday. That event that I talked about on this floor as we were discussing the Individual Freedom Bill just 2 months ago. Colleagues, my community is angry, and I can't even say, maybe it's not anger, maybe it's just, we're just infuriated. We consistently experience attacks. We've been attacked on our right to vote. We've been attacked on our right to protest. We've been attacked now through representation throughout our entire lives. Historically, highway construction and city planning has focused on removing blight in the Jacksonville community, which has been used to excuse the demolishing of historic Black neighborhoods. Have you heard of redlining? Many of you have. It's a discriminatory lending practice on people of color based simply on where they live. The East Side neighborhood was redlined for the first time in 1930, and it still suffers the aftermath of that. It is now, ironically, has a highway, the MLK highway, running directly through the center of this neighborhood. Imagine that. The road that the state has used to crack Black communities is named after the man who fought against the exact same thing. Offensive, simply offensive. And now these congressional maps proposed by this governor and entertained by this legislature now have been so clear about their intentions. Florida voters have already made it clear, and you've heard that over and over, and you will continue to hear that over and over, that they want fair districts. And it was our job to pass that fair district amendment, which we did overwhelmingly in 2010. It's our jobs as representatives to uphold the will of the voters. Are we so tired of doing our jobs that we are going to roll over and accept whatever this governor hands us? I'll let you think about that. We're going to vote today on these maps that, number one, you know are unconstitutional. These maps have no regard for the Voting Rights Act, no regard to the Fair District Amendment, no regard to the 14th Amendment, no regard to the Constitution, and no regard to Black voters, brown voters, and communities that I serve as well as you serving. You represent Black and brown communities just like I do. But colleagues, here's the vein of this. You hate when we use the word disenfranchisement. You turn your back, you look the other way, but you have to realize that is exactly what this is. Gutting now CD4, the protected status leaves us simply without representation. It simply means that the Black population in Florida that lives north of the I-4 corridor, their voices will be diluted, their power in this process simply washed away. The only thing I can say, as you look the other way, you turn your back, that you know this is unconstitutional, and you know this is unacceptable, and you know that it's offensive. We're tired of being put in this situation by this legislature. How can you not see that this is wrong? But you do. How much longer are we going to have to fight to get all of you to understand what we're dealing with? Our voice matters. Our votes matters. Our lives matter. We need to be protecting Florida's Black representation in Congress, not attacking it, not diluting it, and definitely not removing it. For those reasons, colleagues, I just urge you to think about everything that all of us will say and vote no on these maps.
Representative Wilhite.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Do you recognize Representative Edmonds?
Representative Edmonds in debate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Florida became the 27th state in the United States on March 3rd, 1845. By 1850, the population had grown to 87,000, including about 39,000 African-American slaves and 1,000 free blacks. That comes out to about 46% black, 54% white in percentage. For those who do not know of Josiah T. Walls, he was a man of historical distinction for Florida. Before he was the former mayor of Gainesville, he died in Tallahassee in 1905. He became the first African-American congressman in 1871, the only black to represent the Sunshine State until 1993. That is about 119 years of representation without any black representation in the Sunshine State. So we asked, why is Fair Districts and Voting Rights Act important? Well, it's important because it led to people like Alcee Hastings, Kareem Brown, Carrie Meeks, Val Demings, Sheila McCormick, Brian Donald. And the whole point, I want to say, if you vote yes to this, I want to say that you're basically setting us back 20 years. If you feel comfortable voting yes, you have to understand that you probably will be in the same history of the people who created the black codes, of the people who created Jim Crow era laws.
Representative
Yes.
Edmonds, I would ask you not to impugn the members of this chamber if you would like to talk about the policy before us, but to impugn members based on a potential vote is not an appropriate use of the debate time. You are recognized to continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the
Just
clarification.
one moment, please. Representative Alexander has asked for a point of clarification. Yes, Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, in all due respect, but I think history and facts is not impugning anyone in this chamber. I think what the representative was doing, Madam Speaker, was going through a series of historical facts that is relevant to this historic vote is being taken today. But that's the way I take it. So.
And while I understand that, and those historical facts may certainly be discussed, to tie it to a yes vote on these maps would be impugning members of this chamber based on the vote that we are about to take today. So if we want to talk about the historical facts, I have no problem with that. That is fair game. But to call out other members of this chamber being related to those historical facts is based on a vote is inappropriate. So that is where I would ask the line to be drawn, please. You may, yes, Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just for the record, that wasn't his intent. I did not hear, I was paying attention very, very closely. And I respect every member of this chamber, but this is a very serious matter. And just how some people may be offended by the words in this chamber, heck, I'm offended by the map.
And I understand that, Representative Alexander. I am listening very intently, too, so that I can hopefully call balls and strikes and make sure that we are all having a conversation with the level of decorum that this chamber deserves. And like I said, I have no problem discussing the historical facts to tie members of this chamber and their vote to those events in history is inappropriate for conversation today. Yes, Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And to be my last point, let the records speak for itself. And hopefully the representative will continue to express himself in a fact, historically driven manner.
And I will do that. Thank you, Representative Edmonds. You are recognized to continue.
Thank you, Representative Alexander. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, colleagues. Again, in no form or fashion am I looking to be offensive. I'm just trying to give historical content. So all I'm saying is we went 119 years or 112 years without representation. If you vote yes on this map, essentially you're going to set us back to the era where we had no representation. You cut it in half. Thank you. Thank you, members. So yes, we are the South, but I hope that we can set a precedence here to show people that it's not about politics, it's about people. So I ask and urge all of my friends, colleagues, and members to vote down this map and let us come back and figure out a good map. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Wilhite.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Do you recognize Representative Skidmore?
Representative Skidmore in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution and government of the United States and of the state of Florida, that I am duly qualified to hold office under the Constitution of the state, and that I will well and faithfully perform the duties of state representative on which I am now about to enter, so help me God. We all said those words. I don't know what supporters of this bill and this process have done to justify this mockery to themselves. I can't imagine what gut check you did, what you said to your reflection in the mirror. You know this is unconstitutional. I know this is unconstitutional. Your failure to uphold your oath and stand up to the bully in chief is shameful. Straighten your spine and vote no.
Again, members, we are here to talk about the policy of the maps and not to discuss individuals in this chamber and their motives or the vote that they're going to take. And I ask you to respect that as we move forward so that we can have a meaningful conversation about this important topic in front of the state of Florida. Representative Wilhite, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Do you recognize Representative Escamani?
Representative Escamani, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I think the concern that many of us have is that we feel like this map is offensive. And so for those who subscribe to this map, you are unfortunately subscribing to what we believe to be a history that is dark and one that we should not repeat. And so with that said, with the few seconds I have left, this does impact Central Florida. It impacts minority access seat right in my community, and I'm very worried that the trajectory of this state not only feeds into what is an unconstitutional vision that benefits one party over the other, but also erases the perspectives of people of color. And I really ask you to take these concerns seriously. Don't just toss them aside. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Time having expired, Representative Grant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you please recognize Representative Harding in debate?
Representative Harding, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, if you served on the Congressional Redistricting Committee, you may have heard similar comments. I made it yesterday in committee, or 2 days ago. But one of the things that, the reason that I support this map is, first, I believe it's a constitutional map. Second, there's a process. There's been a process. We had committees. We ultimately passed the map off this chamber. The governor has an ability to be able to veto that map. In transparency, we have a map. We've been able to ask questions, as Representative Tuck mentioned as well. But probably the irony that I've seen is that when we talk about process, yesterday we had an amendment for map 8060. And it's interesting because during the regular session, not a single member of the Democrat caucus proposed a map. We could all propose maps. None were filed. No amendments were filed in the House. And so my point is, on the process, we've had a process. Folks have chosen, and that's beyond my decision, but folks have chosen in the back rows to not propose maps. So my question is, if we're going to talk about courage, there was a process to propose maps, and that makes me question what the point would be. I'll support these maps today. I urge all my colleagues to do the same thing. And on coming back and being a part of a special session, it's our job. When we were elected to serve in the Florida House, our job was to get things like this done. This has to be done every 10 years. And if we got to keep coming back, if we have to be here for 10 days, that's what it takes. But today we're going to vote on this map, and I will be supporting it, and I urge my colleagues to do the same thing.
Members will take a brief moment to recognize newly former Representative Renee Placencia. Welcome back to the Florida House. Leader Grant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you please recognize Representative Beltran in debate?
Representative Beltran, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Leader Grant. And I want to start off and thank everyone for their good work on this. This was not an easy process, but we've really gotten to a good product. And as I've said before in committee and on the floor, as bills move through the process, and the process doesn't always end here on our floor, the bills get better and better, and that's what we've been able to accomplish here. As we heard yesterday, we got really clean lines. We divide counties fewer times. We follow prominent geographic and political boundaries, and we've continued to improve our product. And I think we've done this in a fair and impartial way. I want to address a couple things that were said by the opposition. The first is that some sort of notion of erosion of checks and balances. Well, let's go through what checks and balances are and how that's worked in this process. We have a give and take first within our committees and then with the Senate. And we collaborate with the other chamber. We have a give and take. We come to something we can pass. We send it to the other chamber. They send it to us. And then it goes to the governor from there. He examines it, looks at it, he signs it or vetoes it. If it's vetoed, it comes back. We can do an override. We can pass something else. All of that process has been followed up to this point. And then when that's all over, then anything you pass gets challenged in the courts. And everyone has said on both sides that that's probably going to happen. There's going to be some litigation. They've already filed some cases. And all of that's happened. That's exactly the way any sixth grade civics student would expect checks and balances to work. It's worked. Hasn't worked the way it normally works. Hasn't worked to everyone's liking. But checks and balances are working. I mean, there's a lot of criticisms you could make about redistricting generally, the VRA, whatever it is. The fact that checks and balances didn't work in this case, I mean, we spent a lot of time on this. Checks and balances are working, believe me. So that's number one. And then number two, there's this notion that the governor doesn't have some role in our legislative process, and that the governor, somebody said the governor didn't elect us. Well, okay, fair enough. The governor didn't elect us. Our constituents elected us, the same constituents that elected the governor. And by the way, there's people who voted for everyone in this room who voted for the governor. And I know that. People come up to me, they say, you know, I voted for a Democrat for legislator, and I voted for the governor. The governor was elected to, among other things, be involved in the legislative process, as we've discussed. The governor's been involved, the Senate's been involved, we've been involved, the courts are going to be involved, the constituents and stakeholders. They were able to come to the committees and subcommittees and make their voices heard. Everyone's got a voice in this process, whether it came out exactly the way anyone wanted. You can't say that the process didn't work or that the governor, somebody said the governor's meddling. He was elected to be the chief executive of the state, and now he's meddling. I find that argument a little bit ridiculous. And then there's another contradiction that we have, which is a month or two ago, we had a product. It was passed off this floor, and there were criticisms of that product. And some of the criticisms are the same criticisms that they're making now. So when the leadership and the body do something, they did what they thought was right. They were trying to follow the laws as they thought it was at the time, or that they thought the court would interpret it. And the opposition didn't like that. Then we go and we're taking a different approach. Let's be honest about that. And then they're still not happy. So I don't know if we're supposed to stick to our guns or do a give and take with the governor. It seems no matter what we do, that there's a criticism of the process. And then there's the criticisms of the map itself. During the very first block, there were two consecutive debates. One of them said they were concerned about packing. Somebody used the word packing. The next debate, another colleague in the opposition was talking about diminishment. Okay, packing and diminishment are opposite sides of the same coin. They're the opposite thing, right? You either, if you do too much, then it's packing. You do too little, then it's diminishment. Now, I guess there's some Goldilocks principle. It's not in the VRA. It's not in fair districts. I don't know where this Goldilocks principle is, but I guess legislatures have to calibrate it exactly right. Where is that principle? I don't know where that principle is. The idea that folks are coming with that argument just means that the entire thing is unadministrable, because neither I, nor the governor, nor any court can ascertain what that standard is. And there's a lot of case law, a lot of ink has been spilled trying to ascertain that. But let's talk about what the case law says. The case law, the prevailing federal court case law, basically comes with one proposition, which is if you're going to take into account these types of things that we're not supposed to take into account, it says right there in the 14th Amendment. These arguments have no support in the 14th Amendment, the text of the 14th Amendment. But if you're going to do it anyway, it's got to be narrowly tailored. You have to have a compelling state interest. You can't have a sprawling geographic district. And you have to follow these principles. You really have these exacting principles. And the last couple of federal Supreme Court cases that have reviewed it have said, no, the state has not met that burden. Nowhere in that body of the prevailing case law, and I prefer to follow the text of the Constitution, but we won't want to talk about case law. Let's talk about case law. It says if you really want to do it, you have to meet these stringent criteria. Nowhere does it say that you have to do it. Nowhere does it say that you should do it. It says if you really want to do it, you're going to be subject to these very stringent criteria. So the suggestion that there's some notion out there that we have to do something that the opposition is suggesting, as opposed to just follow geographic boundaries, draw without reference to that sort of thing, try to do something fair, follow our county lines, major roads, which we've done in this product, I reject that proposition. And the last thing I'll say is there's a suggestion by the opposition we follow a method. We used to follow that method 50, 100 years ago. We got bad results, okay? It was not the right thing to do. That was not a good part of our country's history. If we drew a school district the way folks are suggesting we should draw a congressional district, if we made a new county or a new municipality in that way, if you did a CDD, or you made a private person tried to make an HOA like that, you would be enjoined in federal district court in about 35 seconds. There's very few areas of governance where people even suggest that we do this sort of thing, and this is one of them, and I don't understand why, because we don't do that in a variety of other contexts. So I'd ask everyone to think about that when they vote. Thank you.
Representative Graham.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We yield the remainder of our time in this segment.
Having yielded the time in the segment, Representative Wilhite, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You recognize Representative Benjamin.
Representative Benjamin in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The 14th Amendment was enacted to protect people like me, people who look like me, because our country during that time said that people who look like me weren't worthy of citizenship, weren't worthy of the rights that my ancestors slaved for. We weren't worthy. And so Congress, in its wisdom, sought to protect people like me. And in doing so, we breathed life into the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment still wasn't good enough to confer upon me the ability to be involved in my government and select its leadership. So we had to breathe life into the 15th Amendment to ensure that we had the right to vote. And in breathing life into that amendment, we said that we should not act in a way that would diminish the ability of minorities to elect people to represent them. And I make no bones about it, for many of us that means electing someone who looks like me. That's what it means. My ability to elect someone who looks like me under the premise that they share the same values as I and will come here and speak truth to power. And then Shelby came along and eroded that. Shelby came along and said that although we had over 115 to 120 years of no black representation in Congress, that in less than a century, we have now somehow been rehabilitated. And we should no longer look at it. But then the people of Florida spoke in fair districts. And the people of Florida said, we think it's still important to protect representation by minorities. And in Florida, we will not diminish that representation. These are common legal principles. Our federal government comes in through the 14th Amendment and sets the floor and says that you must do at least this. And it leads to the state governments an ability to regulate higher. Sometimes that meant making more restrictive laws. But in fair district, it meant expanding protections. It meant ensuring that the progress of people who look like me wouldn't be diminished. And that's what this map does. It's clear. From in 1877, we only had one member of Congress. In 1992, we went to 3. Today, we have 5. After today, we will only have 2. Florida says that we should keep moving forward. Stop setting us back. Let us move forward. Black votes matter. Black voters matter. Black representation matters. I matter. My colleagues matter. Vote down on this bill.
Representative Wilhite.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You recognize Representative Diamond.
Representative Diamond in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, our founding fathers were very worried about the dangers of power. They understood the corrupting nature of power. President George Washington, in his farewell address of 1796, warned about how the corrupt and powerful can try to manipulate government. He warned that, quote, cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which had lifted them to unjust dominion. Because of these concerns of the dangers of unchecked power and the recognition that power corrupts, the founders sought to find ways to check it. And that obviously goes to the heart of the problem we have with this map. We have a duty to do this work. We, the legislature, we do. Not the governor, we do. And we have a duty to the people who we serve. And we have a duty to follow the law. The Fair Districts Amendment of our state constitution, which was designed to restore the core principles of Republican government, that the voters should choose their representatives and not the other way around. We have a constitutional duty under that provision to ensure that the maps that we pass off this floor were not drawn with partisan intent. That is a Tier 1 standard. So what do we know? There are a few things we know, but only a few things. We know that this map was drawn by the governor's office with the help of his consultants and lawyers. We know that this map was not drawn by our committee's professional staff. We know that this map was not drawn under the supervision of our esteemed chairman, Representative Leak. We know that this map will pass this legislature with less than 48 or 72 hours of scrutiny. in a special session in which this body's own redistricting committee did not even meet to consider it. We know that this map will pass with no meaningful opportunity for public comment or feedback. We know that this map has been reported to produce a delegation from this state to Washington of at least 20 Republicans to 8 Democrats. So Republicans would hold over 70% of this state's congressional seats in a state that Donald Trump carried with only 51% of the vote. We know that this map is riddled with internal inconsistencies. And we know we've had very little time to ask questions about those inconsistencies. So I'm outraged, members. I'm outraged that this is the final product of so much work. I'm outraged by the attack, as my colleagues have so eloquently expressed, on our black representation in Congress, on the attack on our Voting Rights Act, on our willingness to ignore the requirements of federal law. Members, our duty is to follow the law, not to ignore it. A federal judge who struck down Senate Bill 90 recently wrote, at some point when the Florida legislature passes law after law disproportionately burdening black voters, this court can no longer accept that the effect is incidental. Black voters matter, black representation matters. There's a history in this country, as my colleagues have so eloquently described, of systemic discrimination, and that is what the United States Voting Rights Act is designed to protect. So, members, we are abdicating our duty to the people we have been elected to serve. Please vote no on today's map. Thank you.
Representative Wilhite.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Do you recognize Representative Woodson?
Representative Woodson in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, we are here to do what's right, and we know what is right. The 3 branches of government, as mentioned earlier, they were established for specific reasons. We know there's something called the separation of powers. And we all are here, we are smart enough to know exactly what that means. As you know, every time I stand here, I don't stand up on all hearings that we have here in these chambers, but something that important, I have to stand up and speak on behalf of the people who elected me. And you know that I am from Haiti. Haiti, where people do not respect laws. They do not respect rules. And I know this is something that we know, that we respect. Laws and rules, and by not respecting laws and rules, I ended up coming here being of service to the people of this beautiful United States of America, where the state of Florida is where I choose to reside. I have a 13-year-old who is looking to become a state legislator. And I have explained to him our duties, the governor's duties, everyone's duties. And you know, he called me yesterday. And what he said to me was appalling. He said, "You have lied to me." I said, "No, I did not lie to you. I told you the truth. We are responsible to draw these maps, to discuss these maps, to meet each other halfway, to vote on these maps and submit those maps to the governor to either approve them or veto them. And once they are vetoed, the court would take over." And he said to me, "Are we doing our job, the job that the people of the state of Florida elected us to do?" I'm talking about a 13-year-old. So members, we have a duty. If we vote yes on this map today, we are telling the voters that the fair district amendments do not matter. We say no thanks to accountability and to fairness, which is what as legislators, we're supposed to do. Members, you are about to make a mistake, and you have time to do what's right. You want to go down in history as someone who have done what's right. And I'm not going to be long-winded because we have heard from all the members, from all those who have spoken, but I'm going to leave you with one thing. In the words of Maya Angelou, just do right. Right may not be expedient. It may not be popular. She said it may not be profitable, but I'm going to say it may not be popular. But it will satisfy your soul. Let's try to live our lives by a way that we will not regret. And I'm asking you, please, let's do right by the people of Florida who have elected you to serve in these chambers. Thank you.
Representative Wilhite.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You recognize Representative Bartleman.
Representative Bartleman in debate.
My first morning here, I attended a rally on the old Capitol steps. As I waited for it to begin, I sat with an elderly black woman. I saw the pain on her face. This woman grew up in the Jim Crow era. She fought to ensure that her grandchildren grew up in a different world. She saw progress, and after today, she will see the clock turn back, and she will be denied representation. History shows us that there were people in America who lived different experiences like that woman. I am here to be a voice for all Floridians and ensure that everyone has equal representation. Patrick Henry in May of 1765 laid out the taxation without representation argument. This chamber spent a year drawing a map to meet the U.S. and Florida constitutional standards to ensure fair representation for all, and that map was vetoed. This chamber has always recognized the importance of fair representation. There is a plaque right outside those doors commemorating the black members of the House during the period of the Reconstruction and Redemption era, and all of their names are listed. I understand why this legislature has abdicated its duty to draw the map. Who wants to knowingly draw an unconstitutional map? We spent a year discussing Tier 1 and Tier 2 guidelines, and now we are voting on a map that clearly violates everything we fought for and discussed. In fact, it is intentionally inconsistent. How can South Florida districts be drawn with Tier 1 adherence and other parts of the state drawn differently with different guidelines? I am that woman's voice. We are that woman's voice. This map diminishes minority representation, is internally inconsistent, and violates our Constitution. I urge everyone to stand up for that woman and all Floridians and vote no.
Having concluded this segment, Representative Grant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you please recognize Representative Robinson in debate?
Representative Robinson, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And look, members, I'll be brief today. I don't always trust members when they say that, but I will be brief. I couldn't help notice yesterday that there were a lot of questions about whether we elevated Tier 2 standards over Tier 1 standards. We also heard this line of questioning in the subcommittee, and I want to say firmly that that has never been the case. Tier 1 always outranks Tier 2. And in my opinion, that is firmly true in this map before us. Yesterday, members also said, why are we only hearing about Tier 2? Where's Tier 1? Well, let's just put that into context really quick. The vast majority of the districts asked about yesterday are not Tier 1 protected districts. Maybe that's why. It's true, there were questions about Congressional District 26, and Congressional District 26 is a Tier 1 protected district. And even though that district was a bit different than the map that we approved a few weeks ago, Chair Leak explicitly said that the House performed a functional analysis to make sure that district still performs. So members, it seems to me that we actually did hear a lot about Tier 1. There are just many, many more Tier 2 items to be discussed as they were yesterday. To me, it's that simple. And finally, members, I believe in this process. I believe in the process that we have followed. I believe in this map, and I urge your favorable support.
Representative Grant.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you please recognize Representative Latvala in debate?
Representative Latvala, you recognize in debate.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Members, I grew up in Jacksonville, and the first time I was eligible to vote was in 2000. Shortly thereafter, I moved to Orlando to go to school, and I discovered that I was in the same congressional district in both Jacksonville and Orlando. So I did some investigation, and I realized that that congressional district was a skinny line that went from Jacksonville to Orlando, and literally had one side of the road in some parts, but not the other side of the road, which I thought was ridiculous. And I then found out that it was not drawn by the Republican Party. But that was the definition of gerrymandering. And, you know, there's been a lot of talk about minority districts and a lot of talk about getting rid of minority representation. One thing I have not heard mentioned is a former member of this chamber who's now in Washington, who is a black man, and that is Representative, now Congressman Byron Donalds. I believe that his voice matters, his vote matters, and I believe that his constituents who have elected him to Congress in Lee County also agree with that. So, thank you.
Representative Grant.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We yield the remainder of our time.
Having yielded the remainder of their time, Representative Wilhite, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you recognize Representative Robinson?
Representative Robinson F., you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I've been sitting here for the last 2 days listening, I wonder, where is the consistency? Where is the following the process with these congressional maps? Why do we continue to change the rules to work for a select group of Floridians? Let's look at the maps. This map that we're looking at today is very defined boundaries when it comes to CD4 and CD5 of St. Johns River. It was drawn very clearly, and it was pointed out by the drawer of the map that he made sure that he made these clear boundaries so that residents will know their boundaries. The water is a clear mark. However, when it comes to CD13 and CD14, these districts don't follow those guidelines. Tampa Bay is water, but it's not used as a clearly defined boundary for that district. That district actually cuts across the water. Why? Is it that these residents, those Floridians in those districts, don't need clearly defined boundaries? It's an inconsistency. This map has explicitly been stated as the governor's map. The governor stated in the past that districts should not be more than 150 miles. However, when we look at CD 18 and CD2, both are more than 150 miles. Again, inconsistent. The legislature has a process, and I believe one of my colleagues says that I believe in the process. I believed in the process too when we follow it. From my understanding, the process is that legislation is to be heard in the subcommittee, then the committee, before coming to the floor. Well, we heard this one in the subcommittee, but not in the full committee. We were told when money's attached, it's supposed to go to the Appropriations Committee. We didn't do that. Inconsistent again. If we have a process and we're supposed to believe in the process, and me being an educator and we teach children what the process is because this is supposed to be their future, why can't we just follow the process if the process is what we're supposed to, do? Basically, this is just not right. Floridians deserve to have the same process applied to all legislation. The same process should be applied to all districts. Let's stop picking and choosing. For decades, we have told people that their vote was their voice. For our brown and black communities, they have begun to take that to heart, and they've taken that very seriously. In this past election, our already marginalized communities exercised their right to vote in mass numbers, and I believe that's why we have this type of a map. And the governor's reaction, or our reaction, is to create a congressional map to minimize voting districts with people of color to show that brown and black votes don't matter. The dismantling of districts, constant attempts to whittle away our rights, and an effort to make it harder for everyday working people to vote blatantly tells me that our votes do matter. And that's why they're strategically trying to stop that. But what it really says is that, again, our votes matter, and they're trying to make it harder for us to get to the precincts or to split districts. We know that this dilutes our voice. I'm speaking to the people now. Don't let it happen. As a lawmaker and an educator and a lifelong voter, this really sickens me and it angers me. So I hope that we'll get it right. And the last thing I'm going to say is, before I got on the floor today, I called back home and I talked to my mom. And her seniors, we call them the golden seniors, they're praying for you all to make the right decision.
Representative Wilhite.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To recognize Representative Hunchofsky.
Representative Hunchofsky, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to preface and start off by saying I absolutely love being a member of the State House of Representatives. I feel incredibly honored that the members and voters in my community elected me to be here to represent them. I take this job incredibly seriously. I am the daughter of 2 immigrants. My dad actually served in the Army Reserves before he ever became a citizen. This means something. I was super excited when I was put on the Congressional Redistricting Subcommittee because this is a once-in-a-decade process. This is the core of what we do. And I followed all the rules that were given to us. So I want to be clear, they're not my rules. They're the rules that staff gave to us, and we were told over and over again of the rules we need to follow. Not talking to anybody outside about the maps, not going on social media and discussing the maps, but following the Tier 1 and the Tier 2. And the Tier 1 that was drilled into us regularly during the committee weeks was that districts shall not be drawn with the intent or result of denying or abridging the equal opportunity of racial or language minorities to participate in the political process or to diminish their ability to elect representatives of their choice. Tier 1. We were part of this process. We were told to talk to staff, leadership, and we did all of the things we were told to do. This map doesn't do those things. We presented an amendment yesterday that was not taken up by this body, that was passed in a bipartisan manner, that still had CD10 and CD5 as protected seats under Tier 1 protection. I'd like to add that that bill did not have a $1 million appropriation to fight legal challenges, and it also did not change the venue to Leon County for any legal challenges. But that's what this bill does. That's what this map does. Secondly, we were told you have to focus on Tier 1 before you can look at Tier 2. I am a former local elected official. I love my cities and my city people. So for me, keeping cities whole was important. But it was not more important than Tier 1. In Tier 2 standard, it says districts shall, where feasible, not mandatory, but where feasible, utilize existing political and geographical boundaries. Yet we have decided which boundaries we're going to pick. The St. Johns River, we don't want to cross that for whatever reason, yet Tampa Bay, it's okay to cross. So I bring all this up because I want to be very clear. These are not my rules. These are not my standards. These are the law. These are the standards we were given. We followed it in every subcommittee meeting. We brought our concerns to leadership, to staff on every meeting. And yet here we are with a map that does not follow the standards we were told to follow. And for that reason, I will be voting no.
Representative Wilhite.
Speaker, you recognize Representative Humphrey.
Representative Humphrey, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you so very much, Madam Speaker. Father, guide my words and deliver my thoughts in a manner that is heard and just. Forgive me, Floridians, for not working harder to ensure that my colleagues heard my thoughts in reference to voting against our maps that we passed out. Chair Leak, and to our solid redistricting team, I should have passed out from trying because I saw this crap coming. When I got here, the evenness and the balance of our executive branch, our judicial branch, and our legislative branch is what guided me and balanced out the reason I fight the way I fight. When I saw that each branch of government was balanced, I stood up against one of the branch members when I disagreed with how they decided to use their executive power. They came after me and tried to take me out in the 2020 elections. But I knew that me standing up was the right thing for me to do as a legislative branch member. I implore you today to understand that we are indeed separate from the executive branch. And I apologize because I did not stand with my colleagues when I should have as a legislative branch member. But today, I say to you that we are not doing what is just and right for the people of Florida. I feel as if I have failed because I didn't speak to just all my colleagues. I only spoke to my policy person and about 5 of my other colleagues. I said that this was going to happen. It fell on deaf ears because we were trying to be partisan instead of thinking about Florida. Well, my colleagues, you now are in a similar position because now you are deciding what's best for Florida, but will you be partisan in your delivery, or will you be stronger than me and do what's right against this executive branch's will? I have 3 nieces, Zoe, 13, Callie, 7, and Sanai, 1. Callie, the 7-year-old, when I got elected to office, or I got in early, I was confirmed as a state representative-elect on qualifying day. And Callie took me into the bathroom, which is common for her, and asked me, what the heck does it mean, Auntie Nika, to be a state representative? And I went through all these analogies for Callie. I told her, well, I'm gonna make laws, and I'm gonna help balance the budget, and Callie said, what does it really mean? And I said, Callie, we're gonna learn together. We're gonna learn together what it means for me, and every time I learn something, I'll tell you something more. Callie doesn't understand what the heck's going on, and she's brilliant. She tested gifted. And I'm sure that when they test her again, she'll probably be on the spectrum of something amazing, because that's who she is. She came here with me when I got sworn in, and she sat right next to me. And she heard when I took my oath of office. So it's back in your hands now. I failed, but I'm looking forward to my colleagues not failing the state of Florida. We have our duty as legislators to do what is right for Floridians, regardless of our party affiliations.
Representative Wilhite.
We recognize Representative McCurdy.
Representative McCurdy in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I I want to talk to the people at home. Hello, Black Floridians at home today that's watching this. The Florida House is about to cut your representation by 50% before lunchtime. We shouldn't be in here begging for representation in 2022 or begging you to not diminish minorities' ability to elect representatives of their choice. Alarming, but not that all surprising, being elected to the Florida legislature is the one job that you can have in this state. Come to work and then refuse to do your job. You've heard over and over that the state's constitution directs the legislature, to redraw district boundaries. And this charade playing out today will further negatively impact people I represent, people that look like me, people that talk like me, people that struggle like me, people that already don't have. And we're trying to take more away from them. What this body is saying that is that people that already don't have won't have. People that already don't have opportunities won't have representation now. I've had enough of being kicked around in this building, in this chamber, and still being expected to smile and shake your hands and engage in conversation with the same people who are trying to oppress my people. In the words of the late Congressman John Lewis, where is the heart of this body? Where is our soul? Where is our moral leadership? Where is our courage? Today is not in this chamber. By lacking the courage to stand up to Governor DeSantis, his bullying, reject his political games, and uphold our duty as legislators to draw constitutional maps, we have totally failed the people of this state. Vote no.
The time having expired, Leader Grant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Please recognize Representative Fine in debate.
Representative Fine, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's been fascinating to watch this process, and I want to thank the Speaker and Chair Leak for allowing me to be the Vice Chair of the full Redistricting Committee. We spent months learning about the law, Tier 1 and Tier 2. I've learned more about redistricting case law than I ever thought I would. It's reconfirmed my belief that I'm very glad that I turned down the opportunity to become a lawyer from my alma mater, and I'm glad I did not go through that process. I'm very much so. You know, there's an allegation yesterday, and it's frankly brought through today, that there was a, quote, abrupt change in philosophy, end quote, presumably in the configuration of these districts. We've abruptly changed at the behest of the governor. Something I'll talk about in a little bit. What strikes me as odd, though, is yesterday, in all the time we had for questions, there wasn't one about the governor's veto letter or his general counsel's testimony from committee this week. Now, it's a novel legal question. I don't think there's any debate that there is unresolved legal issues that are going to have to be resolved. And by the way, the maps we passed before, I believe, had already been heading for the courts. But with any novel legal question, there's going to be many unanswered questions. This is only the second redistricting cycle since the constitutional standards. Courts providing clarity as part of the process. And by the way, there are many people who believe that when that 2016 map was finished for the 2010 redistricting, that it was unconstitutional for the same reasons we're going in a different direction today. You know, however, even though there was zero questions of clarification, not a single one, there was plenty of rhetoric, and it's continued today, alleging the definitive unconstitutionality of those districts and in turn, the disparagement of a community. Maybe it's a facade. It's an inauthentic line of questioning set up for alternative purposes. Perhaps it's set up for future plaintiffs or just to perpetuate a hateful message. So I'd like to talk about three things that relate to that. The first is we got to hear a recitation of the oath that we swore when we got elected to follow the state constitution and the U.S. Constitution. I'd encourage people to go back and take a look at the U.S. Constitution, because many of you don't appear to know it, lawyers and all. See, we do not live in a parliamentary democracy where the percentage of people who look like you or act like you or think like you determine your representation. If you want that, there are other countries you can move to where they aggregate the votes of the entire area and then they assign that percentage to seats in their legislature. That's not how it works here. But I also want to talk about the inherent racism in the concept that many of you support. When you say that minorities have the right, or any group has the right to elect the candidates of their choice. I want to use one example from the maps that we passed before because I remember it. The Jacksonville district that we talked a lot about before, I remember the staff as I was reviewing it telling me that it was 35% black. The seat, you know, that would be right there in the middle of Duval County, 35% black, and that would be enough to guarantee the selection of the candidate of their choice. I want you to think about what that means. It means the other 65% don't get a say at all. See, when we guarantee that a group of people gets to select the candidate of their choice, what we're saying is we're guaranteeing those who aren't part of that group get no say. Chew on that one for a little bit. The second thing that I find a little bit hateful is the notion that we violate separation of powers, that we're mindless automatons of the governor. I would remind all of you that the vast majority of us in the front rows voted against what the governor. We were in this room debating the maps when he put out the message saying, I will veto what you are going to do. He sent it out on Twitter while we were here having that discussion. Very few people in this room have worked as closely with that team downstairs on various issues as I have, and yet I voted against it. We are not mindless automatons. We don't do this because we are bullied. We do this because we think it is right. And lastly, I would like to remind us of history, because as my good friend, Rep. Alexander, reminded us, history is appropriate to share. And there is a shameless history, a shameful history, where there was an effort after Reconstruction to make sure that certain groups of people had no say in the process. In 1875, Reconstruction ended in Florida. And it was not the Republican Party that was put in charge. In 1880, redistricting was done in this state to disenfranchise minorities, and it was not the Republican Party. In 1890, redistricting was done to disenfranchise minority voters, and it was not the Republican Party. In 1900, it was not the Republican Party. In 1910 and 1920 and 1930 and 1940 and 1950 and 1960 and 1970 and 1980 and 1990. All those shameful years that you all want to remind us of, it wasn't the predecessors of folks in the front rows who came up with those maps. Today, we pass maps that are constitutional, and they will be litigated, and we will learn whether the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution reigns supreme over the Florida State Constitution. That is the discussion at hand. There are some very smart lawyers in this room that I respect quite a bit who've told me that they think that will happen. I'm going to trust them. I believe these maps are constitutional, and I encourage all of you to vote for them.
Representative Grant.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We yield the remainder of our time in this segment.
Okay, thank you. Having yielded time, Representative Alexander, do you have a point of order?
Just point of clarification to the body. I would like to put in the record the word neoconservatism for the record.
Representative Will Height, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You recognize Representative Learned.
Representative Learned, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, to the clerk's office for making sure we had the timestamp on the board today. I think it's important we have the date up there because I honestly, based on the last debate, I wouldn't know if it's 2022 or 1965 with the debate against the abolishment of the Voting Rights Act that we just heard. I'm a simple trigger puller, and I'm certainly not a Harvard-educated lawyer, so I have no idea what any of that means. But what I do know is y'all found a way to divide and carve a 50-50 state into a 20-8 partisan gerrymander. That's what's before us right now. And you found a way to cut minority representation in half at the same time. The outcome speaks louder than your words. People should choose their representatives, not politicians choosing their voters. This flies in the face of the U.S. Constitution, the Florida Constitution, and more importantly, every democratic ideal that we hold dear. When gerrymandered districts make legislators more afraid of primaries than they are of general elections, you end up with folks fighting on TV, CNN, and Fox News over who can be more divisive. And we saw how that resulted on January 6th of last year. St. Petersburg and Tampa are two different cities. This idea that water makes it contiguous and satisfies a math formula is absurd. Manatees do not vote. This map is a blatant partisan gerrymander. It is designed so the governor can raise money in California and New York and solidify his primary chances against former President Trump, and he's willing to put black voters in the state of Florida under the bus to do it.
Representative Wilhite.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You recognize Representative Joseph.
Representative Joseph in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Florida is made up of a beautiful mix of peoples, from our Native American communities, the descendants of colonial settlers, the descendants of enfranchised slaves, and a multi-partisan, multicultural group of immigrants who come here all the time. Our representatives should be reflective of that diversity to ensure that all of our voices are heard. Those closest to the pain should be closest to decision making. And no one knows our communities better and the pain better of those communities than those experiencing those pains. So rather than accepting the gerrymandering that had been done by politicians, carving up our communities to silence voices from and deny resources to certain communities, Florida voters, Democrats and Republicans, voted to amend our Constitution to require that we draw fair districts. But right now, the GOP has the power, and we get that, but there's no need to cheat. You really don't need to stack the deck. By sacrificing black representation on the altar of the governor's political ambition, we are now stacking the deck 20-8 and have the gall to say that somehow this is not partisan. The governor's map blatantly favors his political party, but not for the benefit of Republicans, certainly not for Democrats, and absolutely not for the people of Florida, but rather to continue to ignore the pains of the people of Florida in favor of lining campaign coffers and financial interests of friends. He claims it's supposed to protect us from discrimination, but does so by discriminating against black representation. But the funny thing is, his maps were still able to protect Hispanic districts just fine. I'll just end with this. Rather than drawing districts that divide us or silence our voices based on what we look like, our zip code might be, how much money we have, what language we speak, black representation matters, and Floridians deserve maps that represent all of us, not some of us.
Representative Wilhite.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You recognize Representative Thompson.
Representative Thompson in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I shared with you the words of Frederick Douglass before in this chamber, who said that I will work with anybody to do right and with nobody to do wrong. And this map is wrong. I shared with you Florida's history of poll taxes, that was wrong. And the history of literacy tests, that was wrong. Grandfather clauses, that were wrong. Intimidation of African American voters, that was wrong. Violence, people having their homes blown up, people being lynched because they wanted representation, they wanted to vote, that was wrong. And this map compounds the problem, and that is wrong. This may be abstract for many of you, but it's flesh and blood to me because I have worked with Carrie Meek, I worked with Alcee Hastings, with Corrine Brown, the three people who had to bring a lawsuit, by the way, to be the first African Americans since Reconstruction to go to Congress. And that was in 1992, 30 years ago, not ancient history. Last year, I went to the funeral of Carrie Meek. I had a chance to visit with Representative Robinson, Representative Woodson while I was in Miami. And a lot of people were there. Carrie Meek was eulogized by Congressman James Clyburn. Steny Hoyer spoke at her funeral, as did Joyce Beatty, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Frederica Wilson spoke at the funeral, and she reminded people of a time in the Florida legislature when Republicans and Democrats, blacks and whites, worked together for the good of the state of Florida. She told us about Carrie Meek and Don Gates setting up a system of hospice. And hospice was where Carrie Meek spent her last days. Blacks and whites working together. This is not abstract for me. This is flesh and blood. And I will not sit here today and dishonor the sacrifices, the struggles, all of the things that those individuals did to give us 3 seats in the United States Congress, and today we have 4. And this map, which is wrong, would take us to 2. We should not compound the problem. I also shared with you the words of Dr. King, who said that a man can't ride your back unless it's bent. And so I'm standing tall today, I'm standing straight today, and I will not bow to the ego, to the ambitions of one individual who wants to take us back. Now, it's not about the color of the skin, it's about the lived experience of people who understand that the poor will always be with us, as is said in the Bible. They understand that health care is disproportionately available in certain communities. They understand quality, affordable housing is not available in certain communities. They understand about Pell Grants and the need to fight for education in certain communities. They understand the need for economic development in certain communities. And so it's not about skin color, it's about lived experiences and bringing that perspective. As human beings, we tend to have the kind of, I guess, blindness that if it hasn't happened to me, it doesn't exist. And when you look at financial disclosures of people in the legislative process, you understand people come from very privileged backgrounds in Congress and in this body. And you need the perspective of people who are willing to go outside and to mix with the folks whose voices are not heard here in this chamber. And so you need African Americans in Congress. To the credit of this body, you all followed Tier 1 when you drew the legislative seats. We talked about the 30 seats that were established after the 2010 census, and you made sure that there was no diminishment, that there was no abridgment of equal opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. Now, we didn't get any more than 30, but we didn't get less than 30. So why is it all right in this map to have less than the 4 that we had when we began? I want you to stand up. I won't bow. I'm hoping you'll stand with me. I hope you'll stand tall, because a man cannot ride your back unless it's bent. Thank you.
Representative Wilhite.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Do you recognize Representative Hinson?
Representative Hinson in debate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Wow, I'm not bending my back. Most of you know, members, I don't stand down from telling how old I am. My lived experiences. In 1965, when the Voting Rights Act was passed, I was a senior in high school. At 15 years old, I was marching on lines and sitting in driveways and getting spit on for sitting at lunchroom counters. I've been kicked. I've been talked about. And I've been called names you don't even put in the dictionary anymore. Voting Rights Act of 1965, I fought for that. I've met Martin Luther King. I don't just talk about him. He taught me peaceful protest. And here we are today, 2022, rolling back the tide. Whew. Y'all are pushing this bill like Thug Life 101. I didn't get to ask questions about my own proposed district yesterday. I wasn't given that opportunity. So let me tell you about it today, because I got to call your attention to it. I live in Congressional District 3. If you got your map, pull it out and look at it. My current CD3 has 6 counties: Clay, Marion, Alachua, Putnam, Bradford, and Union. I share this congressional district with several of my esteemed members in the front rows. The proposed District CD3 has 11 counties. 11. 10 red, 1 blue. That's a radical change. Contrary to the sponsor's assertion that it's compact, it is not. Number one, I don't understand these terms, so I may be misusing them, but I'm going to use them anyway. It cracks and packs in favor of your party. That's a violation of the Fair District Amendment Tier 1 criteria. It favors your current incumbent, Southern Belle Kamek, a violation of the Fair District Amendment Tier 1 criteria. It diminishes minority voters from 31+% to less than 15. It took Clay County out, and it matched it with Nassau, and it's given them the minority preference. Congressional District 3 is unconstitutional. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 states that majority minority districts can be created in order to prevent the dilution of minorities' voting strength. It further mandates that electoral district lines cannot be drawn in such a manner as to improperly dilute minorities' voting power. Everybody's telling you. We're saying it repeatedly. Now, in 2015, according to Ballotpedia, there were 9 such districts. That was just 7 years ago. 2015, 9 such districts. Yesterday, I heard Chair Leak say it's now 3, 2022, and after today, it will be 2. That's a fast-moving train, gentlemen and ladies. He complains about a large malady of ignorance afflicting a sizable chunk of elected officials. That's us. And he laments about America's office holders. That's us. We are abdicating our constitutional responsibility and subverting the power to him. He further complains that this inclination to spend
Representative
other people's...
Hinson, the time has expired in debate. Representative Hinson, the time has expired. Members, this is not. We need a formal recess. We are in formal recess. Sergeant, please secure the chamber.
Members, we will restore order. Show us an informal recess. Informal recess.
You are watching the Florida Channel.
One out of 4 children grow up in a household without a father. It's an issue lawmakers say can no longer be swept under the rug. Capitol Update's Giovanni Hampton reports on a newly signed law that creates programs to address the needs of fathers and kids at risk.
House Bill 7065, a child welfare bill, received bipartisan support during the legislative session. The governor signed the bill into law at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers practice facility.
Okay, guys.
A major part of the measure creates a statewide awareness campaign to call attention to the importance of fatherhood.
I just want to thank all of these men and women behind me, everybody who's been behind this, because it's going to allow groups like ours, people like you, to do great things for our fathers here in Florida.
There are more than 18 million children in our country who live without a father in their home. State leaders are calling it a fatherhood crisis.
But there is nothing more important than the future of our children. And we can help them when they're adults get a job, and we can help them when they're in the university get the right kind of education, or when they're in K-12 to make sure the curriculum is the right one. But the reality is, if you started life behind, it's hard. It's hard.
And if you look at the statistics, 90% of homeless and runaway children did not have a father in their home. 70% of high school dropouts did not have a father in their home, and 60% of youth who commit suicide did not have a father in their home.
The $75 million initiative uses community-based care agencies